Hello dear students, I Professor Agam Dalal on behalf of JK Shah classes welcomes you all. This is the very important video for all the inter May 23 students, either fresh students or repeaters. For all of you, this video is very important and has to be watched before going to the examination. Now what's the video is all about? It is statutory updates which is applicable to May 23 attempt. That is the amendments. But let me tell you, there are mainly two kind of amendments. Number one, the amendment which come via budget. And for all of you which Finance Act is applicable in the examination, Finance Act 2022. This Finance Act is applicable for May 23 and November 23 inter-examination. Now whatever are the changes from Finance Act 21 to Finance Act 22, all those amendments are already incorporated in the study material issued by ICAI. And hence, whenever our May 23 batches are going on or the lectures are over, already those amendments are covered in those lectures. For the repeaters who could not clear November 22 examination, in the crash course, in the fast track, we have covered all those amendments which are already covered in the module. This video is all about this second amendment. This is all the circulars and notifications which are issued by government, that is Income Tax Department. CBDT has issued this circular or notification after 30th April 2022. And so this circular and notifications are not incorporated in your ICAI material, and hence in the lectures also this must not have been done. So this video is applicable again for all the students, number one, who are either appearing for the first time, and number two, who are either appearing for the second or subsequent time. Okay. Now without wasting much of your time, let us directly move to the statutory updates part. First of all, in 4 or 5 chapters they have brought certain circular and notifications which are not there in your ICAI module. And this is the statutory update PDF which is also uploaded on Board of Studies portal. What I have done is, this PDF I have converted into some simple language as I do in all the attempts every time, and we are going to discuss one by one each and every amendments, each and every circular notification. The very first chapter is salaries, in which they have brought some circular. Now moving toward the very basic understanding of the word perquisite in the salary chapter. So whenever employer meets any expenditure of employee or reimburse the expenditure of employee, give any benefits to the employee, this is called as perquisite. So basically, if employee is getting any kind of medical treatment and employer is doing reimbursement of that medical treatment, even that reimbursement is also called as what? Perquisite in the hands of employee, and hence it will be taxable in the hands of employee. But as you are all are aware that there is a proviso to section 17 clause 2. There is a proviso to section 17 subsection 2 which says that in certain conditions, in certain scenarios, the perquisite related to medical facilities is not taxable. Like, if treatment is provided in government hospital, it is not taxable. If treatment is provided in employer's own hospital, it is not taxable. If treatment is related to the specified disease and it is provided in the hospital which is approved by Commissioner of Income Tax, again that is not taxable. In all other cases, it is taxable. One more exception is added to this particular rule. If the treatment is related to COVID-19 disease, if the treatment is related to COVID-19 disease, whether related to employee or any family member of employee, and the expenditure is reimbursed by employer, whatever expenditure is reimbursed by employer, that will not be taxable as a perquisite to employee, subject to some conditions. So see what exception they have provided. Number one, the expenditure should be incurred either for employee or any family member. And you all are aware that family member over here is defined. In section 17 subsection 2, the word family member is defined. That is spouse, children, dependent or independent, parents, brother, sister. These three should be completely dependent. So the expenditure is for employee or family member. Number two, the second condition is the expenditure should be related to COVID-19 disease. COVID-19 disease or any other disease which occurred due to COVID-19. See, you all are aware that after COVID-19 also many people faces many issues like heart problem, etc. And all this is because of COVID-19. So this expenditure should be either for COVID-19 disease or any other disease which occurred due to COVID-19. And if employer is doing reimbursement of the expenditure, incurring any expenditure on behalf of employee, then those expenditure will not be termed as perquisite in the hands of employee, provided there are certain conditions which are given under a notification. Provided there are certain conditions which are given under the notification number 90/2022, which is issued on 5th August 22. Then what are the conditions subject to which the exemption is given? Number one, certain documents you have to keep with you. Certain documents you have to keep with you, and whenever asked by income tax department, you have to submit. First, COVID-19 positive report or any medical report which suggests that the disease is because of COVID-19. Second, all necessary document of medical diagnosis or treatment for COVID-19 or any other illness which suffered within 6 months from the date of COVID-19 positive report. So as I said, any expenditure done by employer for COVID-19 or any other disease which occurred due to COVID-19, but it should be occurred within 6 months. So whatever expenditure is done, you have to maintain all the necessary document of medical diagnosis, like what treatment you took, hospital discharge summary, and all those documents you have to keep. And last, a certification on all the expenditure incurred. Certificate you have to keep with you that all these expenditure are true, and based on all the evidences we have claimed the expenditure from the employer. So that certificate has to be kept with you. So these 3 documents you need for claiming the exemption, and if these 3 documents are there with you, whatever expenditure is done by employer, it won't be taxable as a perquisite. So this is a very small circular which is issued. The circular importance for coming into the examination, I don't think that it is much important, but then yes, they can ask you 1 or 2 marker small theory question if they want. The very next related circular or related notification we can say, it is from income from other sources, IFOS chapter. IFOS chapter, one of the very important sections, section 56 subsection 2 clause 10, gift income. That if any person gives any kind of sum of money or property, either in cash or kind, which values 50,000 or more in a financial year, whatever is the value received, that will be taxable in the hands of recipient fully. Now over here, there are certain exceptions which is provided within the section itself. There is a proviso which says that if the gift is received from relative, it is not taxable. Gift is received at the time of own marriage, it is not taxable. Gift received under will or succession, it is not taxable, and like that. Some more exceptions are also there. In this, one more exception is added, and this exception you must have studied during the lecture itself. Now what is that exception? Basically 2 exceptions are given, that in those 2 cases again gift income will not be taxable. The first exception says that if any kind of money is received by an individual for expenditure either on himself or family for illness of COVID-19. See, what the very first exception says, that you have received money, and the money is received for what? For doing expenditure on treatment. Treatment of what? COVID-19. Either you are suffered from that or your family member is suffered from that. For that you have done some expenditure, and to help you out, any other person has given you money. Then that money received will not be taxable because it is related to treatment of COVID-19. Sir, we just studied that. What is the difference between that and this provision? That was related to salary when it is received from employer. This is related to any person. So if any person gives you the gift which is related to given for the treatment of COVID-19 disease, that gift will not be taxable. That is the simple provision. But the condition is now added. When this exception will be there, the exemption will be available if you keep following record with you. First, you need to have COVID-19 positive report or any medical report, same as above. And again same, all necessary document of medical diagnosis or treatment of COVID-19 or any other illness which suffered within 6 months from the date of COVID-19 positive report. So the first two documents are kept over here also, then only the exemption is available. So remember, whatever exemption they have given in salary chapter when employer gives you the amount, and whatever exemption they have given under this particular section when any other person gives you the amount. But that was the first exemption. Now the second exemption, where gift income is not taxable, and that said that if you receive the gift, and who gives you the gift? Any family member of the deceased person, received by family member of deceased person from employer for any amount, or from any other person up to rupees 10 lakh, then gift income is not taxable. So let's say that any particular person died because of COVID-19. Now because of the death, the employer of the deceased person gave certain amount to the family member of deceased person, to run their future life, etc. So whatever is the amount given by the employer of the person to the family member of maybe lakhs and lakhs of rupees, crores rupees, it won't be taxable. Or else the gift can be given by any other person apart from employer, but that will be exempt only up to rupees 10 lakh. Whatever is the excess amount, that will be taxable. See over here, two exemption is there. Number one was the amount given for the treatment of COVID-19. Second is the amount which is given in case of death. In case of death. Now two person can give that amount. Number one, employer of deceased person, any amount given is exempt. Number two, any other person can give you the amount, but that will be exempt only up to rupees 10 lakh. Whatever is received over and above that, it will be taxable. But this exemption is available only if the amount is received within 12 months from the date of death. This amount has to be received within 12 months from the date of death. So that is written, this exemption only if death is due to COVID-19 and gift is received within 12 months from the date of death. Now again over here they have added certain condition that exemption is available only if you fulfill the following condition. Number one, the death should be within 6 months from date of testing positive. So let's say a person is COVID positive and the report came on 1st April 2022. Now he died due to COVID-19 on 30th June 2022. That is within 6 months from the date on which he became COVID positive. Then whatever is the amount received in case of death by the family members within 12 months from the date of death, that will be exempt. So 6 months you have to see in case of death and 12 month time period for receiving the gift. Now what if the person became COVID positive on 1st April 22 and the death is on, let's say, 31st December 22? Then exemption is not available, because the death is after 6 months from the date on which he became COVID positive. The death should be within 6 months. So that is the very first condition, that the death should be within 6 months from the date of testing positive. And the other one, that the family member should maintain the following documents, following record to claim this exemption. The first one, COVID-19 positive report or medical report which suggests that the death is due to COVID-19. And the second one, this is very crucial, medical report or death certificate. If it is medical report, then from medical practitioner, death certificate, then from government civil registration office, which states that death is due to COVID-19. Now this is the very harsh provision and the harsh document that they have kept over here. Why I am saying this? In case of our country, you must have observed that many deaths happen due to COVID-19, but in death certificate they have not written the exact reason of COVID-19. They must have written any other reason. In that case, the question arises, the death certificate do not suggest that the death is due to COVID-19. Whether income tax department will give the exemption to the family member in case they receive any gift? Now, as per the theoretical aspect, the answer is no, because there is no document which suggests that the death is due to COVID-19. But if we see that in real life, income tax officer may allow the exemption, because ultimately they also know that this must be the reason because of any medical report or so. So it totally depends on practical aspect, but so far as theory is concerned, you have to remember total 3 conditions. Number 1, the amount should have been received within 12 months from the date of death. The death should have occurred within 6 months from the date on which the person became positive. And number 3, that there should be a death certificate or medical report which suggests that death is due to COVID-19 illness. Okay, one more we can say a requirement is given to all the recipient. If you are receiving any kind of gift, either for the treatment of COVID-19 or in case of death of any family member, you receive any kind of gift which is exempt as per section 56 subsection 2 clause 10, then you have to furnish a declaration to income tax department. See, you should not add the same into your income tax return because it is not taxable, but a separate form has to be submitted which they will prescribe which form and in which manner to be furnished, that they will tell us. But they will require us to furnish a declaration that we have received this kind of gift which is not taxable, and those declaration has to be furnished within 9 months from end of financial year or 31st December 2022, whichever is later. Now, what is the meaning of this time limit? See, first of all, what information you have to furnish to income tax department, that what kind of gift you have received which is exempt under 56 subsection 2 clause 10 and which is related to COVID-19. Now, those particulars you have to furnish within a particular time frame. And what is the time frame given? Within 9 months from end of financial year or 31st December 2022, whichever is later. So let's say we are talking about the gift which is received in the year 2021, which is not taxable. Details is to be furnished. Now, what is 9 months from end of financial year? 31st December 2021 or 31st December 22, whichever is later, 31st December 22. Now, if the gift is received in the year 21-22, what is 9 months from end of financial year? 31st December 2022 or 31st December 22, whichever is later, 31st December 22. If the gift is received in the year 22-23, what is 9 months from end of financial year? 31st December 2023 or 31st December 22, whichever is later, 31st December 23. So, this time limit will be important, that the details to be furnished within 9 months from end of financial year or 31st December 2022, whichever is later. Fine. So, that was the circular notification which is related to IFOS chapter and particularly gift income. Whatever we have studied up to now in this video, everything is related to COVID-19 situation. Either from employer, then salary chapter, from any other person, gift income and like that. So it was all about COVID-19 relaxations that they have given. Now certain things which are not related to COVID-19, and that is incorporated within the chapter TDS TCS Advanced Tax. The very first topic, according to me, the most important for your examination, having the highest chances of being asked in your examination, because for the first time May 23 attempt students are learning the section, and the section number is 194R. This section you must have studied within your lectures because it is already included in study material. What is not included in study material is CBDT guidelines, and that is very important to understand in this video. But before going to CBDT guidelines, I will just have a quick overview of the section 194R. I always give one example in the classroom. Let's say I am a person having the showroom of electronics, and let's say the showroom is Gada Electronics, and I sold many TVs of Tony company. I sold Tony TV. So Tony TV gave me a complimentary trip to London. It sponsored my London trip because I sold so many products of Tony TV. Now see, Tony TV is my supplier. My supplier has given some benefit to me during the course of my business. So whatever amount of expenditure Tony TV has incurred on this London trip, that is kind of benefit for me, that is kind of perquisite for me, and this benefit or perquisite is in relation to my business. It is taxable under section 28 under the head PGBP, that is profit and gain from business or profession. So any kind of value of perquisite or benefit arising from business is taxable under the head PGBP as per section 28. But nobody was disclosing this income while filing income tax return. And hence, government made Tony TV to deduct TDS of Gada Electronics before releasing the benefit. So that government came to know that this person has received certain benefit, it should be taxable. So a TDS is implemented, section 194R, that whosoever gives any kind of benefit in the course of business, either in cash or in kind, will deduct TDS under section 194R. The threshold is 20,000, that if the benefit in entire year exceed 20,000, then 10% TDS is to be deducted. TDS to be deducted before releasing the benefit. However, who is supposed to deduct TDS over here? So first of all, section 194R, deduction of tax on benefit or perquisite in respect of business or profession. Very important to note that this section is with effect from 1st July 2022. It is from 1st July 22. It is not applicable from 1st April 22 till 30th June 22. Who will deduct TDS? It is the same person which are mentioned in section 194A, 194C, 194H, 194I, 194J, which I call Achich. So, who is the person liable to deduct TDS over here? Two persons. First, every person other than individual or HUF. And number two, individual HUF whose last year turnover exceed, if it is business then 1 crore, if it is profession then 50 lakh. So who is supposed to deduct TDS in 194R? Every person other than individual or HUF, or individual HUF whose last year turnover exceed 1 crore or 50 lakhs. To whom you are paying? You are paying to a resident person. And what he is getting from you? Benefit or perquisite either in cash or in kind, that is monetary or non-monetary. When you have to deduct TDS before releasing the benefit? What is the threshold? 20,000. And when I write only 20,000, by default it means greater than 20,000. If exact 20,000, no need to deduct TDS. And what is the rate of TDS? 10%. So let's say I am giving the benefit worth rupees 20,000, no TDS. Worth rupees 21,000. On entire 21,000, 10% TDS is applicable. Under which section? 194R. From which date is applicable? 1st July 2022. But there were certain doubt difficulty with regards to practical aspect which CBDT has cleared by way of question answer format. So if you see this study material which is given on Board of Study portal, over here they have given all these guidelines in a question answer formats. So these are the question answers that CBDT has given, and what I have done is I have just covered over here, but all the things are covered in some easiest manner. So let us learn one by one what this guideline says. The first clarification that they have issued is, it is not necessary to check that benefit is taxable to the recipient under section 28 or not. See, it may be possible that Tony TV is giving some kind of benefits to Gada Electronics. Now Gada Electronics is into the business of selling the TV, receiving the benefit from the supplier. It is taxable under the head PGBP, that we know. But it is also possible that Tony TV is giving this kind of benefit to so many other customers also. Then whether this kind of benefit is taxable to the recipient? If yes, then only you deduct TDS. If no, then you don't deduct TDS. If this kind of requirement is given to Tony TV, that is the payer, it will be very difficult for the payer to deduct TDS in case of these benefits, because it will be a genuine hardship You are saying the payer that you please check that whether the person is liable to pay tax on this amount. If yes, then only deduct TDS. This cannot be done practically, and hence in the very first question they have said that for the payer it is not necessary to check that whether the benefit is taxable or not. If according to you it is the benefit, deduct TDS. Whatever is the future taxability, that the recipient will see in the income tax return. Second, they said benefit may be a capital asset or any other nature. TDS still applicable. See, this is just a clarification. In the act itself they have said benefit can be in cash or in kind. It can be monetary, it can be non-monetary. Either you can give money to the recipient as a benefit, or you can sponsor certain trip, you can give jewelry as a complimentary. It can be a capital asset, it can be other benefit, it can be monetary benefit. In any form, if you are giving benefit, TDS is applicable. The third one is very important. Let's say there is a person called Mallya Company. Mallya and Company. It has taken a loan from Punjab National Bank. It has taken a loan from Punjab National Bank, let's say worth rupees 1000 crore. So the loan is taken by the company. Now, so many times lapsed, but still this company is not repaying the loan to the bank, and hence it is a NPA. It is a bad debt for the bank. Now what bank has done? Bank has said to Mallya and Company that please repay 200 crore, will waive off your 800 crore. See, to do certain recovery you have to give certain relaxation in case of NPAs, and hence bank has waived off 800 crore and has said to the company please pay 200 crore. How much amount is waived off? 800 crore. Can I say that was the amount, that was the liability of the company which is now not to be repaid? It is again one kind of business benefit, taxable under section 28. This kind of waiver is taxable to the company under PGBP head because it is the business benefit. So okay, Mallya and Company is required to pay income tax on this 800 crore rupees of waiver. That is okay. But now you can't say to the bank that you are giving benefit of 800 crore, deduct 10% TDS. Here bank has to deduct TDS of 80 crore. Don't you think so? Mallya and Company is not going to pay this 80 crore. Bank has to pay again from own pocket. Already bank is suffering a loss of 800 crore, and on that again you are saying to have one more loss of 80 crore rupees of TDS. That is not possible for the bank, and hence Act has clarified. CBDT has clarified in the guideline, principal loan waiver by the bank is a business benefit under section 28. However, deduction of TDS on such benefit will be a hardship to the bank, hence no TDS on such waiver. So it is a business benefit, but still no TDS is applicable. Okay, how to do the valuation of the benefit? See, if the benefit is given monetary, like I have given you 30,000 rupees, then I know that I have paid you 30,000, 10% means 3,000. What if I am giving you jewelry as a gift, as a business benefit? I am having that London trip sponsored. Now how to do the valuation of that benefit? Because TDS has to be deducted, na? So valuation has to be done. If such things are purchased, then purchase price. So if I have to give you jewelry as a business benefit, I have purchased from somebody else in rupees 1 lakh and I am giving it to you. 1 lakh is the benefit which I am giving you. But if it is manufactured, so for example I am Kalyan Jewelers and I am giving you a jewelry as a business benefit free of cost. So I have to see that if I am not giving it to you free of cost, if I am giving it to any customer, I am selling it to any customer, what amount I would have recovered, what amount I would have collected, that much will be benefit for you because that much expenditure is saved. So if it is manufactured by the giver, by the payer, then price which is charges to its customer will be benefit value, and on that 10% TDS is applicable. While calculating this benefit value, GST amount is not to be included. So the valuation of benefit is always taxable value, not invoice value. GST not to be included. So how to do the valuation of benefit? If it is a purchase thing which I am giving it to you, my purchase cost. If it is the thing which I have manufactured, and I'm giving it to you, then what if I would have sold to my customer, how much amount I would have recovered, that much will be benefit for you. Okay, the next point, you must have observed that many social media influencers are there which are working as a marketing agent of any company. So let's say any beauty product company is there, made a face wash. Just a simple example, made a face wash. It gave that face wash to the social media influencer who will do a particular advertisement campaign by recording certain videos and all. Now the thing is over here that whenever the company is giving a face wash to this social media influencer, this is also one kind of benefit which is given. Na? So whether this benefit is taxable to social media influencer, and before giving the benefit, whether TDS to be deducted. So the answer is given by CBDT that if after recording the video, the face wash is returned to the company back. So let's say whatever product you have given, the influencer will return back to the company. It was just taken to record the video for marketing, then obviously it is not his own benefit and hence not taxable, no TDS. But what if he will keep the product with him for his personal use then after recording the video also? Then it is a benefit from the company to the social media influencer. It will be taxable to the influencer as business benefit, TDS to be deducted. See what I have written? Social media influencer is given some product to make video or audio for marketing. If such product is returned to the company, then it is not a benefit, hence no TDS. But if such product is not returned, then it is a benefit, hence TDS under 194R is applicable. Provided the entire value in a year should exceed 20,000, then only TDS is applicable. Okay. If I am giving any monetary benefit, then deducting 10% TDS is very simple. I have to just deduct the amount and I have to pay the amount. What if I am giving certain benefits in kind and I have to deduct TDS before releasing the benefit? Then how to do that? I have two options. One, I can say the recipient that let's say I am sponsoring your London trip. That is the benefit for you worth rupees 2 lakh. On the 10% means 20,000 rupees of TDS I have to deduct. 20,000 TDS I have to deduct. What you can do is, you only pay 20,000 to government as an advance tax and you send me the challan. So that, okay, I am ensured that you have paid the amount. Indirectly I have deducted TDS. Or number two, what I can do is, I can demand 20,000 from him. I can take that 20,000 and I will deposit to the government as a TDS. So in short, 20,000 rupees should reach to government before I release the tickets of London to that person. And government should come to know that yes, this person has received the benefit of 2 lakh. So how to ensure before releasing the benefit in case in kind that tax is paid to government? Either ask the certificate of advance tax paid by recipient before releasing the benefit, or ask the amount of TDS from recipient and pay to the government. The same happens in case of 194B casual income also. Fine. One more doubt arised over here is, let's say there is a company A Limited which has purchased a plant and machinery worth rupees 10 lakh. So purchase price is 10 lakh. Now A Limited is giving a gift of rupees of this asset to B Limited as a business benefit. So can I say the business benefit is given more than rupees 20,000? Purchase price is 10 lakh, so benefit value is 10 lakh. 10% TDS under 194R to be deducted by A Limited of B Limited. So 1 lakh rupees of TDS will be deducted. And then the asset will be given to B Limited. So whatever is the benefit of rupees 10 lakh, that will be taxable to B Limited under section 28 under PGBP head. Now my doubt is, it is a depreciable asset. Then whether the recipient can now claim the depreciation? The answer is yes. And on which amount? Rupees 10 lakh will be the actual cost. 10 lakh rupees will be added to the block of asset. Don't you think so that on rupees 10 lakh, B Limited already paid the tax? So now onwards he is eligible to take all the benefits of that asset including depreciation. I generally call this station rule, that the journey of income tax stopped at 10 lakh, so the further journey will start at 10 lakh. So yes, remember this guideline, which is important according to me. If any depreciable asset is given as a benefit, TDS is also deducted, then recipient can take the benefit of depreciation under section 32. And what will be the actual cost? It will be the amount on which TDS is deducted. One more doubt which is solved by CBDT, that many companies issued bonus share, that is free of cost shares are given. Right shares are given at a lower cost to the existing shareholders. That means certain benefits are given to the shareholders in kind of shares. Whether it is a business benefit, on that TDS is applicable, then the answer is clearly no. Because whenever the shares will be sold in future by the shareholder, the cost for the bonus share will be zero. For the right share will be whatever amount is paid by the shareholder. There is no certain extra benefit. Company's share capital don't increases over and above the amount is taken from the shareholder, and hence TDS is not to be deducted. So in one simple line you remember, issue of bonus share and right share is not liable for any kind of TDS. Company is not supposed to deduct TDS of the shareholder while issuing bonus share या तो right shares. Okay. Amongst all the guidelines, one guideline which I think the most important for you, and that is point number 9. Though TDS is applicable from 1st July 22, but the limit computation will be done from 1st April 22. See, what they say is 194R is applicable from 1st July 22 and then onwards. So whatever is the benefit given from 1st July 22 or subsequently, TDS at the rate 10% is applicable on that. However, the limit of rupees 20,000 is per annum. It must be possible that even before 1st July 22 also the benefit was given. Then while calculating the limit of 20,000, even that benefit is also to be counted. However, TDS to be applicable only on the benefit on or after 1st July 22. To make this simple, I have prepared one example. Let's say there is a company A Limited which is giving a benefit to a person Mr. A in the course of business. So basically 194R is attracted. Now the benefits is given in two parts. First, which is given on 1st April 22 till 30th June 22, on which 194R is not applicable. And second benefit is given from 1st July 22 onwards, at which time 194R is applicable. Now in the first 3 months, 10,000 rupees of benefit, and then onwards 2,000. So total benefit in a year 12,000. Can I say less than 20,000? So no TDS applicable. Okay. Second example says that in the first 3 months, the benefit worth rupees 5,000. 1st July onwards, benefit worth rupees 18,000. Now see, here it is less than 20,000. But limit to be computed from 1st April 22 onwards, totaling to 23,000. Can I say more than 20,000? Okay. So TDS is applicable because the total benefit in a year is more than 20,000. However, TDS applicable from 1st July 22 on or after 1st July 22. Now how much benefit is given on or after 1st July 22? 18,000. So TDS only on 18,000. So to check whether TDS is applicable or not, you have to check entire year. On which amount TDS applicable? 1st July 22 onwards. So here TDS applicable on 18,000, 10% TDS amount will be 1800. Then 24,000 in first 3 months, then onwards 4,000. In a year aggregate 28,000, more than 20,000. So yes, TDS is applicable. Yes, TDS is applicable because entire year more than 20,000, but TDS applicable only on 4,000. So TDS amount 4,000 into 10%, that will be 400. Okay, first 3 months 1,000, then onwards 21,000. In a year totaling to 22,000. More than 20,000 TDS is applicable, but TDS applicable only on 21,000. So 21,000 into 10%, 2,100 will be the TDS amount. Last, first 3 months 30,000, then nothing. So in a year total 30,000, which is more than 20,000, 194R is applicable, but there is no benefit which is given on or after 1st July 22, and hence TDS will not be deducted because at that time TDS was not there. So 0 rupees of TDS. So though it exceeds 20,000, but nothing was given on or after 1st July 22, hence no TDS. According to me, this is very important and having the highest chances of being asked in your examinations. Remember this example. So that was the entire CBDT guidelines. The same guidelines they have issued in CA final also. So many points were there which is relevant for CA final, not that important for CA inter. What is more important, which I already said. Okay. Now there is one more TCS. TCS which is already there, even in November 22 also it was there. TCS under section 206C clause 1G. If you remember, TCS under section 206C clause 1G, that if you remit, if you give money to an authorized dealer for remitting outside India more than 7 lakh in a year, 5% TCS will be collected by authorized dealer. Or if you give any amount to a overseas tour operator for managing your overseas tour, whatever amount you are giving to that tour operator, he will collect your TCS at the rate of 5%. So what TCS we are talking about over here? On remittance under LRS, that is liberalized remittance scheme of RBI, amount threshold 7 lakh rupees, or purchase of overseas tour operator package, here there is no threshold. In both of this the rate is 5% TCS. Now this TCS is not to be collected if the amount is received from government, embassy, high commission, local authority, etc. One more exception is given now onwards. So they have given one more exception of this TCS section, and that is to be learnt because the section is already there in your study material and you must have studied in the classroom. This exception is new for all of you. This TCS will not apply to the person who is a non-resident. So let's say one person is a non-resident and he is giving 10 lakh rupees to authorized dealer to send to his own country. More than 7 lakh. Generally 5% TCS is to be collected. But the person who is giving the amount is a non-resident. And if he does not have permanent establishment in India, he don't have a fixed place of business in India, then no TCS to be collected because it is not taxable to the person. Then why government will collect TCS? So what is permanent establishment? Again, a CBDT guideline is there on this, which you will learn in CA final. As of now, it is not to be learnt. As of now, you just remember a fixed place of business in India. That is permanent establishment in India. So when the TCS will not apply, number one, if you are a non-resident and you are not having any permanent establishment in India, then whatever amount you remit outside India, less than 7 lakh, more than 7 lakh, whatever, TCS will not apply. What if you are a resident having permanent establishment? TCS applicable. Resident not having permanent establishment? TCS applicable. You are a non-resident having permanent establishment? TCS applicable. You are a non-resident not having permanent establishment, then only TCS not applicable. So twin condition, non-resident and does not have permanent establishment in India. Fine, that was one liner. Now, the last chapter in which they have issued the circular, assessment procedure. There is a section 139A, permanent account number, and 139A clearly mandates certain persons who are supposed to take permanent account number, like what already is there in your syllabus, what already you must have studied under section 139A. If any person total income is exceeding basic exemption limit, permanent account number to be obtained before 31st May of assessment year. If any person whose turnover exceeds 5 lakh rupees, he has to obtain permanent account number before end of previous year. If any person who is resident other than individual entering into financial transaction more than 2.5 lakh, it has to take permanent account number. Now let's say this person is HUF, then Karta has to take permanent account number. This is a trust, then trustees also have to take permanent account number. These cases are already mentioned in the act, already mentioned in the study material. You already studied this. Now 3 more people are added to the list who is supposed to take permanent account number. 3 more people who is also supposed to take permanent account number if they don't have. So if one person is already having permanent account number entering this transaction, that's fine. If one person is not having permanent account number entering into this transaction, he has to apply for taking permanent account number within this time limit. And these three cases are introduced by way of a rule 114BA. The very first case, if a person, the word is used person, not individual, any person, intends to deposit cash. So check deposit is not covered over here, only cash deposit in any account, saving account, current account, cash credit account, whatever, of a bank या तो post office. The word I have used is bank, either banking company or cooperative bank, or post office, in a financial year more than or equal to 20 lakh. Exact 20 lakh is also covered. So if any person deposit cash in any account of a bank or post office in a financial year more than or equal to 20 lakh, he is supposed to take permanent account number at least 7 days before the date on which deposit over 20 lakh. So let's say I have already deposited 20 lakh. Now I am supposed to deposit more 1 lakh, that is exceeding the limit. Before deposit of this 1 lakh, 7 days before, I have to take permanent account number first. Then only I can deposit any amount over and above 20 lakh in the bank. Okay, here this 20 lakh rupees limit is not per bank account, it is obviously total of all your bank account, total all the cash deposit in any bank account together. So if a person deposit cash in any bank account together more than or equal to 20 lakh, at least 7 days before depositing over 20 lakh, he has to take permanent account number. The same provision is applicable at the time of withdrawal. Any person intends to withdraw cash from any bank account in a financial year more than or equal to 20 lakh, at least 7 days before the date on which he withdraw over and above 20 lakh, he has to take permanent account number. So 7 days before the date on which he withdraw the amount, at least before he has to take pen. So first, deposit cash more than or equal to 20 lakh. Second, withdrawal of the cash more than or equal to 20 lakh. And at least 7 days prior to that, he has to take permanent account number. The third one, any person intends to open current account or cash credit account with bank or post office. At least 7 days before opening the account, you have to take permanent account number. So earlier for opening of current account, permanent account number was not required. For cash credit, it was not required. It was required for term deposit. Now they have also added current account and cash credit account in this. So before opening cash credit account or CC account or current account, at least 7 days prior to that, you have to take permanent account number. If you already have, then ignore this, simple. Okay, you must have studied one more thing in the lecture. CBDT has given a clarification, a rule, that whenever you enter certain transaction as a KYC, as an authentication proof, PAN to be provided. Alternatively, you can also provide Aadhaar number in lieu of PAN. For example, cash deposit more than 50,000 in a day, you have to give permanent account number. More than 50,000 in cash, payment to a restaurant, you have to give permanent account number as a KYC document. Opening a Demat account, you have to give permanent account number. Taking debit card, credit card, you have to give permanent account number. Purchasing any vehicle which is having more than 2-wheeler, so 3-wheeler, 4-wheeler, etc., you have to give permanent account number. So many transactions are there in which as a KYC, as an authentication proof, you have to give permanent account number. And if you don't have permanent account number, in lieu of that you can also provide Aadhaar number. Now in that list, which is already there in your module, they have added this 3 point also. So what now the case is, if you are going to a bank in a financial year depositing more than or equal to 20 lakh rupees of cash, bank will ask your permanent account number. If you withdraw more than or equal to 20 lakh from bank or post office, they will ask your permanent account number. If you go in a bank or post office, open a current account and cash credit account, bank or post office will ask your permanent account number. And hence permanent account number became compulsory for these cases. So 2 places on which they have made same amendment. One, which person is required to suppose PAN, they have added 3 cases. In which transaction the party to the transaction will demand permanent account number, again these 3 cases are added. The requirement of furnishing permanent account number in these 3 cases will not apply if the person is central government, state government or councillor office. Fine, this 20 lakh wala point is important so far as exam is concerned. They can ask in any MCQ or 1-liner, 2-liner, etc. So ultimately these were some circular या notifications which are added over and above what is given in your study material for all the students who could not clear November 22 exams. The amendments which are already given in study material we have covered in our crash course, fast track course, even in our study material. ICAI is also covered in study material in bold sentences. So you can just quickly go through that. All the best for the preparation of May 23 exams, and whenever you need any kind of support, all the faculties of JK Shah classes are always there to support you. Thank you so much.